It was 1:47 in the morning at St. Luke's Emergency Care Center in Houston, Texas, when a child's life hung in the balance, and the truth about American healthcare was about to explode across the internet. Jordan Brooks stood in the harsh white light of the ER lobby, her 9-year-old son Malik burning with fever in her arms. He was wearing his St. Thomas Academy blazer, though it clung to him now like a sweat-soaked blanket. His lips were dry. His voice was barely a whisper. "Mom, my head hurts so bad." But instead of help, they got a gatekeeper. Susan Grant, the supervising nurse on the night shift, looked Jordan up and down, then said the words that would light a digital firestorm. "Ma'am, we don't admit walk-ins without payment up front. $3,000. Cash only. No exceptions." The waiting room went still. 20 people looked up from their phones. Some blinked twice, unsure if they heard her right. Susan's next words cut sharper. "You people think throwing on a blazer and walking in here with fake insurance makes you somebody." Jordan didn't flinch. She wore a charcoal gray Max Mara suit, gold hoop earrings, and a quiet storm of presence. Her dark curls were tied back in a low bun. Her nails were done. Her watch, Patek Philippe, rose gold, flashed beneath the fluorescent light as she pulled her son closer. "Ma'am, we have protocols," Susan barked. Jordan said nothing. She reached into her black Birkin bag and calmly pulled out a Blue Cross Executive Premier card, one reserved for top-tier Fortune 500 partners. Susan didn't even look at it. Fake. Probably stolen. In that moment, a college student in chair 14 tapped his phone twice. TikTok Live. Title: Black Mom Refused ER Care. Still Waiting. 1:48 a.m. Viewers: 193 and climbing fast. This wasn't just a fever. It was a full-blown crisis, one about race, power, and who gets to be believed. What happened next would shake the system to its core, and by sunrise, an entire hospital staff would be facing the woman they tried to dismiss. And this time, she came with receipts. The temperature in the room wasn't just clinical, it was judgmental. Jordan could feel it as she sat down in the far left corner, cradling Malik's limp body across her lap. His forehead was scorching, his eyes glassy, his breathing shallow. She gently dabbed his temple with a silk handkerchief, whispering, "Hold on, baby. Just a little longer." But the nurse's voice sliced through again, sharper now. "You can sit there all night, but no one's going to treat that child without payment. We've had too many frauds trying to finesse the system. No ID, no records, no service." The security guard shifted awkwardly near the entrance. His name tag read Ronnie, and he looked more like a weary dad than a threat. Still, he didn't move. He didn't say a word. Susan Grant folded her arms and addressed the whole waiting room like a courtroom. "She thinks putting on designer clothes makes her better than the rest of us. You can tell it's fake. That bag's probably from Chinatown." Jordan didn't react. Not even a blink. She'd been in tougher rooms than this, corporate boardrooms filled with men twice her age and half her intellect, trying to talk over her. This wasn't new. But it was more personal. Because this time, it was about her son. Malik moaned softly, turning his face into her shoulder. "Mommy, I don't feel good." "I know, sweetheart," she whispered, kissing his curls. "Mommy's here. I've got you." A woman 2 seats over, a Latina grandmother holding her grandson's asthma inhaler, muttered, "This is wrong. That baby's sick. Look at him." Someone else whispered, "Ain't right." But Susan didn't hear. Or maybe she didn't care. "Look, lady," she said loud enough for the whole room to hear. "You're not special. You don't get to skip the rules because you think you're somebody." That's when Jordan stood up. Slowly. Deliberately. She adjusted the weight of her son in her arms and looked Susan straight in the eye. "I didn't ask to skip any rules," she said, her voice low, steady, practiced. "I asked for care. Medical care. For a 9-year-old child with a 104-degree fever. And I gave you the rules," Susan snapped. "No," Jordan said. "You gave me assumptions." The room fell silent again. Just long enough for TikTok's viewer count to cross 2,000. And just long enough for the first comment to go viral. "She's too calm. She's been here before. This ain't her first rodeo." The tension in the room hung like humidity, thick, unmoving, undeniable. Jordan didn't flinch as she shifted Malik gently against her chest. She reached into her Birkin again, this time slower, letting the silence build around her. Every eye in the waiting room was on her now. Not out of curiosity, but anticipation. They were watching to see what she'd do next. She pulled out her wallet, sleek black Italian leather, and unfolded it like a judge revealing a final ruling. Inside sat her identification, her insurance documents, and a card so rare most people only saw it in magazines. The Blue Cross Executive Premier Card. Black with silver etching. Issued only to C-suite executives of companies with over $500 million in annual revenue. It wasn't just health insurance, it was access. First-class priority. 24/7 concierge-level support. Jordan placed the card gently on the reception desk. Susan glanced at it and rolled her eyes. Anyone can print something fancy these days, she muttered. Probably got it off Etsy. Jordan remained silent. Susan picked up the card like it was covered in bacteria and turned to the security guard. Ronnie, can you verify if this is even real? Ronnie hesitated. His gaze dropped to the name on the card. Jordan Brooks. Then to the matching name on the ID tucked behind it. Then up at Jordan, holding her son, who was visibly struggling to stay conscious. He didn't move. Susan scoffed. Why am I not surprised? She turned to the crowd again, feeding off the attention. They always try to game the system. Designer bags. Fancy cards. No actual proof. Jordan reached into her purse once more, this time pulling out her driver's license and a corporate ID badge. Her name. Her title. CEO. Titan Health Systems. Susan stared at the badge for one beat too long. But instead of backing off, she doubled down. You people think if you flash enough shiny stuff, someone's gonna forget the rules. Jordan's voice came sharp and steady. No one asked for exceptions. I'm asking for treatment. For a child with a dangerously high fever. This isn't about rules. It's about refusal. The TikTok feed exploded. They're not listening because she's black. I've never seen someone get judged this hard for being prepared. Viewer count, 6,300. And rising like a storm. Malik's head dropped suddenly against Jordan's shoulder, limp and burning hot. His breathing had grown more shallow by the minute. His lips were dry. His eyes rolled back for a second, and Jordan felt it, his tiny body trembling in her arms. Her heart slammed against her ribs like a fist. This wasn't just fever anymore. Mommy, he whispered, barely audible. Everything's spinning. Jordan's calm cracked, just a hairline fracture, but it was there. Excuse me, she said sharply, turning back toward the desk. My son is deteriorating in front of you, and you're still questioning a card that can be verified in 2 minutes? Susan smirked. So now we're playing the dramatic mom card? That trick's getting old. That's when it happened. The voice came from the far end of the waiting room, deep, gruff, and filled with disgust. Enough. A man stood up. Late 40s, calloused hands, union boots still dusty from a 12-hour shift. A fire department patch on his hoodie. He pointed toward Malik. That boy's in trouble. I've got 3 kids of my own. I know that look. If y'all don't help him right now, and something happens, I'll file charges myself. On behalf of every parent in this damn room. He wasn't yelling. But the entire ER froze like he'd fired a gun. Another woman chimed in, African American, probably in her 50s, with tired eyes and a Bible in her purse. This is negligence, she said softly. God's watching, Rabi. And so are we. More murmurs rippled through the room. Words like lawsuit, news, and accountability floated through the air like embers. The TikTok stream crossed 10,000 viewers. Comments flooded faster than the app could register. Somebody better call the local news. This is about to go federal. You're watching a lawsuit form in real time. Jordan adjusted Malik, who now moaned weakly and shivered. She turned to Susan one last time. This is no longer about misunderstanding. It's about deliberate harm. And you just crossed the line. Susan opened her mouth, but nothing came out. The weight of the moment, the witnesses, the viral momentum, it was too much. The air inside St. Luke's wasn't just heavy anymore. It was combustible. Jordan looked down at her son's flushed face. His skin was clammy now. His eyes didn't follow movement anymore. This had gone beyond a medical delay. It was becoming a crisis of humanity. She took a slow, steady breath. Then, with one hand supporting Malik's head, she reached into her Birkin bag for her iPhone 14 Pro Max. She didn't scroll. She didn't hesitate. She tapped one name. Denise, EA. It rang once. "Miss Brooks," came the voice, alert despite the hour. "What's the emergency?" "I need you at St. Luke's. Now," Jordan said, her voice calm, but laced with authority. "Bring the legal team. Scene Sander. And call PR. Tell them it's already on TikTok." "Understood." She hung up. Susan blinked from behind the desk, still trying to process the sudden shift in tone. "What? Who are you even calling at this hour?" "A friend to come fight security." Jordan didn't answer her. Instead, she calmly stepped back to her seat and rocked Malik gently, whispering to him as the viewer count on the TikTok stream ticked past 17,000. 15 minutes later, the automatic doors whooshed open. In walked Denise Harper, sharp navy blue pantsuit, not a single wrinkle in sight, carrying a sleek leather portfolio. Behind her were two men in charcoal gray suits with legal pads in hand and determination on their faces. The waiting room collectively inhaled. Susan's mouth parted slightly. "Excuse me, who are you?" Denise walked past her without acknowledging the question and came directly to Jordan. "Miss Brooks," she said, lowering her voice slightly, "we've reviewed the footage. This situation is now classified as formal discrimination and medical negligence." She opened the portfolio. Inside were printed screenshots of the TikTok stream, the viewer metrics, and a full breakdown of St. Luke's ER policies, highlighted in yellow where violations occurred. The lawyers began taking statements, starting with the fireman, then the grandmother. TikTok comments had already started tagging major news outlets. #Justice for Malik hit trending status by the time channel CXS field reporter called Denise directly. In the corner, Susan went pale. Jordan stood again. This time, she wasn't just a mother. She was a CEO with fire at her back and a legal team at her side. She wasn't just here for treatment. She was here for transformation. And the ER was no longer just a hospital lobby. It had become a courtroom. The quiet in the ER was no longer just awkward. It was electric, crackling with realization. Denise handed Jordan the sleek leather folder. Jordan opened it slowly, then reached inside for something far more dangerous than a scalpel or a syringe. She pulled out a simple, elegant business card. Black matte finish. Gold embossed lettering. No gimmicks. Just one name in the center. Jordan Elise Brooks, Chief Executive Officer, Titan Health Systems. Susan stared at the card like it might bite her. Titan, wait, Titan? That can't be. Jordan's voice cut in, calm and deliberate. Titan Health Systems is the majority shareholder in St. Luke's. We own a 61% stake in your hospital and 8 others in the region. She paused, letting it sink in. I'm not just an insured patient, she continued. I'm your funding stream, your infrastructure, your payroll. Gasps rippled through the room. Even the receptionist beside Susan leaned back slightly, blinking in disbelief. Ronnie, the security guard, swallowed hard. Jordan placed the card down on the counter, then slid her ID badge forward as well. This is who I am. The question is, who are you when no one's watching? Susan's jaw tightened, but her eyes darted, looking for an exit in a room suddenly too small. The lawyers flanking Denise began flipping pages. Financials. Board directives. Annual compliance reports. Denise spoke without raising her voice. Under our corporate charter, we reserve the right to initiate emergency administrative review at any time, especially in cases involving patient safety and reputational harm. TikTok's viewer count surged past 24,000. Screenshots of Jordan's business card began flooding Twitter. Hashtags multiplied like sparks in dry brush. Hashtag CO Justice. Hashtag Malik deserved better. Hashtag Still Luke's exposed. One lawyer quietly placed a printed report on the counter. It listed every federal compliance code violated tonight. Susan didn't move. She didn't speak. Jordan looked around the room, her gaze firm but not angry. I came in tonight as a mother, but now I stand here as a decision maker. She turned toward the automatic doors. Whether you stay in this hospital depends on what happens in the next hour. And just like that, every person who had dismissed her realized they hadn't just refused care. They'd provoked a reckoning. The silence didn't last long. It never does when people finally feel safe to tell the truth. The fireman stepped forward first, folding his arms across his chest. His voice was steady but filled with heat. "I was here the whole time," he said, glancing toward Jordan, then back to Susan. She was calm, polite, professional. Her kid was sick. "You didn't just ignore her. You humiliated her." No one interrupted him. Then, the older woman with the Bible slowly stood, one hand on the pewter cross hanging from her neck. "God sees everything," she said, her voice low but unwavering. "But sometimes he uses people like this to shine a light." She pointed at Jordan. "That woman has grace. And y'all treated her like she was nothing. Seeing on you." The room shifted. Not physically, but emotionally. A third voice rose. It belonged to a young Latina nurse in training. She looked nervous at first, like speaking might cost her job. But then she caught Jordan's eyes, and found something steady there. "I'm not on the clock yet," she said, holding up her badge. "But I saw the whole thing. I've been watching how Susan treats certain patients. It's not just tonight. It's a pattern." Susan spun around. "Excuse me." The nurse didn't flinch. "I've reported it before," she said. "But those complaints always disappear." The lawyer beside Denise made a note. Someone clapped. Then, another. And suddenly, half the waiting room was on their feet, clapping, cheering softly, some even crying. Jordan stood still, her son still resting heavily in her arms. Malik stirred, blinking slowly. "Mommy," he whispered. "Why are people clapping?" "Because they see the truth now, baby," Jordan whispered back, brushing his curls with her fingers. "They see the truth." The security guard, Ronnie, finally stepped forward. He removed his radio and set it on the counter. "I'm not removing that woman," he said, his voice clear. "And I'm not enforcing racist policy. Not tonight. Not ever again." TikTok viewer count, 32,000. The moment wasn't just being watched. It was being remembered. Jordan nodded to Ronnie with respect, then looked at Susan, who now stood pale and trembling. The tide had turned, and the witnesses were no longer silent. The doors to treatment bay 3 burst open. Dr. Miguel Alvarez, still in scrubs from stitching a gunshot wound 30 minutes earlier, stepped into the chaos. He wasn't tall, but he carried himself like someone who'd made life or death calls before breakfast. His eyes scanned the room, the crowd, the cameras, and finally locked onto Malik. His tone was pure urgency. "Is that the child with the fever?" Jordan nodded once. "Respiratory rate? Rapid. Shallow. Fever spiked above 104. His neck stiff. Headache. He's slipping fast." Dr. Alvarez didn't hesitate. "That's textbook meningitis until proven otherwise. Bring him now." Susan stepped between them like a barrier that had lost all purpose but was still determined to stand. "Doctor, I am the supervising nurse on duty. This patient hasn't been properly logged. No triage. No vitals. No clearance." He cut her off with a glance sharper than a scalpel. "Then log him on your break. Because if we don't intervene now, this boy may not make it to morning." Jordan tightened her arms around Malik, who whimpered as they moved. His skin burned against her blouse, and her heart felt like it might shatter from the inside. Dr. Alvarez guided them into the treatment bay with swift authority. "Let's get his temp down, draw blood panels, start 4 fluids, and prep antibiotics. I want a spinal tap tray ready just in case." Inside the sterile room, the sound changed. No more whispers. No more judgment. Just machines beeping, gloves snapping, voices focused on one thing: saving Malik. Jordan stood to the side as the team moved with choreography born of crisis. The same system that had nearly failed her was now working at full capacity, for her son. It was late. Too late for dignity. Too late for respect. But not too late for healing. Back in the waiting room, the crowd stood silently watching the door. Susan slumped into a chair, face ashen, her authority evaporated. And on TikTok, the view count soared past 40,000. The comment that hit the top wasn't angry. It wasn't even loud. It simply read, "This could have been prevented. But at least now, someone finally did the right thing." It was 3:08 a.m. when the hospital's administrative elevator chimed. Out stepped Michael T. Larison, interim hospital administrator for St. Luke's Medical Center. He hadn't planned on being at the ER that night. But when legal counsel called him at home with 5 words, "You need to see this," he threw on his blazer and arrived in under 18 minutes. The first thing he saw was a security guard without a radio, a nurse with no authority left in her bones, and a crowd watching TikTok as if it were the 11 o'clock news. Denise greeted him at the entrance, crisp and professional. "Administrator Larison, our client is currently inside treatment, Bay 3. Her son is being stabilized. The legal and media exposure your hospital is facing is already well into catastrophic." Larison adjusted his glasses, eyes scanning the multiple smartphones aimed at him. "What's our current viewer count?" "One moment." She tapped her tablet. "Just past 48,000 live. Trending on every major social platform. News crews are already en route." He exhaled. "Is the board aware?" "They're about to be." Jordan stepped out of the treatment room, calmer now, but only slightly. Her son was finally being cared for, but this wasn't just about her anymore. This was about a system, her system, that had failed on her watch. "Michael," she said evenly, "I need a full emergency board session in the next 20 minutes. Get everyone on Zoom. Use my access code. Mark it urgent. Governance crisis." He didn't argue. 15 minutes later, 9 small faces appeared on a secure video conference screen in a glassed-in office just off the ER floor. Time zones didn't matter. These were people who moved millions before breakfast. Sleep could wait. Jordan stood at the head of the conference table. "This isn't a press issue," she said. "This is a policy issue. This is a culture issue." She handed Larison a printed policy report, highlighted, annotated, and signed. "Effective immediately, I'm invoking executive authority to initiate a Level 1 institutional response. That includes full HR audit, staff restructuring, and the immediate termination of all personnel involved in tonight's incident." A pause. No one objected. On the screen, the board chair simply nodded. Approved. Outside, cameras were pulling into the parking lot. But inside, history had already changed direction. By sunrise, the truth was no longer hiding in policy binders or buried in HR files. It was everywhere. Jordan sat quietly in the hospital's executive conference room, her laptop open, sleeves rolled up. Her son Malik was resting comfortably, fever down, vitals stable. But Jordan hadn't left the building. She wasn't done. Denise entered with a tablet in hand. "The initial investigation's complete," she said. "And it's worse than we thought." Jordan looked up. "How bad?" Denise slid the tablet across the table. There it was. 11 previous complaints. All filed against Susan Grant. All involving Black or Latino patients. All quietly dismissed or marked as unsubstantiated. But that wasn't the worst part. "They were buried," Denise said. "Scrubbed from the official HR database. But we pulled the audit trail from IT logs. Someone manually deleted the complaint files, twice." Jordan's jaw clenched. "Who approved it?" Janet McMillan, former HR director. Retired last spring. Left a gap in oversight that no one filled. Whether intentional or lazy, we'll never know. Jordan tapped the screen, skimming line after line. "She's not the problem," she said. "She's a symptom." Across the country, similar stories had played out for years. Patients of color dismissed, misdiagnosed, or ignored. The difference? This time, the system had picked the wrong mother. Jordan opened another tab. It displayed the hospital's internal bias compliance metrics. Most institutions just used them for show, to check boxes, not to change outcomes. But now the data had teeth. "We're not just restructuring staff," she said. "We're restructuring culture." She looked Denise dead in the eye. No more colorblind training slides. No more generic DEI seminars. From now on, we measure behavior, not intentions. Real metrics. Real accountability. Outside the glass walls, the hospital bustled like any normal morning. But inside, something had shifted. Because when you pull back the curtain of politeness and protocol, what you often find isn't hate, it's habit. And when you let habit go unchallenged, it becomes policy. Jordan stood, smoothing the front of her blazer. Today, she said, we write new policy. On TikTok, the viral video had now passed 3.1 million views. And in hospitals across the country, administrators began whispering one name, Jordan Brooks. Not because she made a scene, but because she made a statement. By 8:32 a.m., the front of St. Luke's Hospital didn't look like an ER entrance. It looked like a press conference. News vans lined the curb like soldiers reporting for duty. Cameras, boom mics, and journalists in windbreakers surrounded the main walkway. Reporters shouted questions as if they were covering a national emergency. Which, in a way, they were. Because what had started as a single moment of discrimination had become a national reckoning. CNN went live first. Then MSNBC. Then a segment aired on Good Morning America, titled, "The CEO Who Changed the Game, One Night, One ER, One Nation Watching." Clips from the TikTok livestream were played on air, raw and unedited. The footage of Susan dismissing Jordan. Malik's limp body. Jordan's steady voice. The business card reveal. It wasn't just a viral moment anymore. It was a mirror held up to the entire healthcare system. And Washington was watching. At 10:05 a.m., Jordan's phone buzzed. The caller ID said, "Senator Marlene Addison." She answered on speaker. "This is Jordan Brooks." The senator's voice came crisp and direct. "Ms. Brooks, we've been following the situation closely. I chair the Senate Subcommittee on Healthcare Equity. Would you be willing to testify at our next hearing?" Jordan paused for just a breath. Gladly. Less than an hour later, her name was trending on Twitter for the fourth time that day. Hashtag Brooks Protocol. Hashtag Testify Jordan. Hashtag Healthcare for All. Denise turned from her tablet, eyes wide. NBC just confirmed, "You'll be the lead story on the evening news." And the White House press secretary, she added, is preparing a statement. But Jordan wasn't celebrating. She stood at the hospital window, watching the press lights flicker, watching strangers rally around the story of her son, of her night, of her truth. "This isn't about me," she said. Denise nodded. "But you were the spark. Because sometimes, justice doesn't start in courtrooms. It starts in lobbies. With broken systems, quiet courage, and someone willing to say, 'No, not this time.' And just like that, a moment became a movement. One hospital became a headline. One mother became a voice. And a sick little boy named Malik became the face of a system forced to finally look in the mirror. 2 weeks later, St. Luke's didn't just look different. It operated differently. Gone were the outdated training binders collecting dust in HR closets. Gone were the recycled PowerPoint slides about diversity shown once a year and never mentioned again. Jordan Brooks had made a promise, and she kept it. At a press conference streamed nationwide, she stood behind a clean white podium and unveiled what she called the Brooks Standard. Her voice was steady, calm, and unmistakably resolute. "From this moment forward," she said, "St. Luke's, and every hospital under Titan Health Systems, will no longer tolerate unconscious bias, hidden prejudice, or passive complicity in patient care." The new policy had teeth. Not just guidelines. Systems. Real-time bias detection software would be installed in ERs to monitor staff behavior. It tracked tone, response time, language patterns. If a pattern of neglect or prejudice was detected, the system triggered a live review. Not a punishment, an intervention. Each hospital would appoint a patient equity advocate, with full authority to pause treatment decisions if bias was suspected. No more, "We didn't know." No more, "It wasn't intentional." Within 72 hours of launching the Brooks Standard, 3 other hospitals requested implementation plans. Within 2 weeks, 17 more joined. Insurance companies took notice. Some even offered premium reductions for facilities adopting the system. But it wasn't just policy that changed. It was people. Ronnie, the security guard who refused to follow a racist order, was promoted to Director of Safety and Ethics. The young Latina nurse in training was hired full-time and placed in charge of onboarding all new ER staff. And Susan. Her license was suspended pending a full state board review. She hadn't been seen since the night of the incident. Jordan's phone rarely stopped ringing. Hospitals. Lawmakers. Medical schools. Even tech companies offering AI support. But she stayed grounded. This wasn't about punishing a nurse, she said in an interview with the New York Times. It was about proving a point, that when systems fail people, it's not enough to apologize. You have to rebuild. And she did. One hallway at a time. One policy at a time. One life at a time. Because the real lesson wasn't just about race, or bias, or insurance. It was about something deeper. The right to be seen, heard, treated, not just as a patient, but as a person. 6 months later, Malik ran down the hospital hallway with a paper airplane in his hand and a smile on his face. His mother followed slowly behind, not in a power suit this time, but in jeans and a soft gray sweatshirt. No boardroom, no podium. Just a mom with her healthy son, and a story that had already changed lives. St. Luke's looked brighter now. Not because of the lighting. Because of the energy. The walls had been painted. The signage was clearer. A framed plaque hung near the ER entrance, engraved with words that weren't there before. Every patient. Every time. With dignity. In honor of the night that changed everything. Jordan stood beside it for a moment, watching Malik fly his airplane past the nurse's station. Staff waved at him. They remembered him, not as the boy nearly ignored, but as the spark that forced a system to look in the mirror. Dr. Miguel Alvarez passed by, gave Jordan a respectful nod, and continued toward pediatrics. Behind him, 2 new nurses in training watched Jordan the way people look at someone who dared to say what others only whispered. She didn't need to say much anymore. Her actions had already written the new rules. Outside, a school bus drove past the hospital. Inside, a classroom of 3rd graders was watching the viral clip of Jordan in the ER. It was part of a lesson on courage, empathy, and standing up. Not just for yourself, but for others. Because what Jordan Brooks proved wasn't just that bias exists, it was that change is possible, and sometimes all it takes is one voice that refuses to be silenced. That voice belonged to a mother, and that moment became a movement. The camera zoomed in on the plaque one last time before fading out. Because every life matters, and every voice deserves to be heard.